Maya Henderson had learned to navigate the world through sound long before she turned 23. The click of her white cane against the sidewalk created a rhythm that told her when she was approaching a curb. The rustle of leaves informed her which trees lined the path to the community center. The distant hum of traffic warned her when she was getting close to the busy intersection near downtown. But it was music that truly made her world come alive. When she sat at a piano, her fingers dancing across the keys, she could see colors in her mind that others described to her, but she had never witnessed with her eyes. She had been blind since birth, a result of a rare genetic condition that her mother explained to her when she was old enough to understand why her experience of the world was different from everyone else's. Her mother, Patricia, worked 2 jobs to support them after Maya's father left when she was just a baby. Money was always tight, but Patricia made sure Maya had access to a small keyboard when she was 7 years old. That keyboard became Maya's best friend, her confidant, and her window to a world beyond the small apartment they shared in the south side of Chicago. By the time Maya was a teenager, everyone in the neighborhood knew about her gift. She would play at church on Sundays, her fingers moving with such grace and precision that people would stop their conversations mid-sentence just to listen. Mrs. Johnson from across the hall said Maya's playing could make the angels weep. Mr. Chen from the corner store said she had magic in her hands. But despite all the local praise, Maya had bigger dreams. She wanted to attend the prestigious Berklee College of Music, to study with the masters, to prove that her disability was not a limitation, but simply a different way of experiencing the art she loved so deeply. The problem was money. The scholarship she needed required an audition, and that audition required traveling to Boston. Patricia had been saving every spare dollar for 3 years, hiding cash in a coffee tin above the refrigerator. They were almost there, just $200 short of the amount they needed for the bus ticket, the hotel for 1 night, and the audition fee. Maya practiced 6 hours every day on the old upright piano at the community center, preparing the pieces she would perform: Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, and a jazz improvisation that she had composed herself. On a warm Tuesday afternoon in late September, Maya was at the community center practicing as usual. The center was mostly empty, which she preferred because it meant no one would interrupt her concentration. She was working on a particularly difficult passage in the Chopin piece when she heard the front door open and close. Footsteps echoed across the wooden floor. Expensive shoes by the sound of them, not the worn sneakers or heavy boots that usually walked these halls. Maya continued playing, assuming whoever it was would pass by or wait until she finished. The footsteps stopped nearby, and Maya could sense someone standing just a few feet away, watching her. She completed the passage and paused, turning her head toward where she believed the person was standing. "Can I help you with something?" she asked politely. "You're making several mistakes in that piece," a man's voice said. The accent was refined, European perhaps, and carried an air of authority that immediately put Maya on edge. "Your tempo is inconsistent and you're not respecting the dynamics Chopin intended. It's quite obvious you've never had proper training." Maya felt her cheeks grow warm. She was used to criticism. It was part of learning any craft. But there was something dismissive in this man's tone that stung more than usual. "I'm self-taught mostly," she explained, keeping her voice steady. "But I practice every day and I'm preparing for an audition at Berklee." The man laughed, a short, sharp sound that felt like a slap. "Berklee? My dear girl, schools like that are for serious musicians with years of formal training. They're not for people who learn by ear from community center pianos. You're wasting your time and, frankly, everyone else's time if you go through with that audition." Maya's hands tightened into fists on her lap. "You don't know what I'm capable of," she said, her voice firmer now. "Just because I can't see doesn't mean I can't play. Music isn't about eyes. It's about feeling, about understanding what the composer wanted to express. It's not about your blindness," the man said, though his tone suggested otherwise. "It's about talent, dedication, and proper instruction. You have a certain raw ability, I'll grant you that. But without refinement, without guidance from masters, you'll never be more than a novelty act at local churches and community gatherings. I'm actually trying to help you by telling you the truth before you embarrass yourself in front of a panel of judges who will tear apart your performance much more harshly than I have." Tears pricked at Maya's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She had faced discrimination before. People who assumed that because she was blind, she was less capable, less intelligent, less worthy of respect. But this felt different. This man claimed to understand music, to know what it took to succeed, and he was using that knowledge as a weapon to tear down her dreams. "Who are you to judge me?" Maya asked, her voice shaking now with anger rather than hurt. "What gives you the right to walk in here and tell me what I can and cannot achieve?" "My name is Viktor Alexandrov," the man said, and even in her anger, Maya recognized the name immediately. Viktor Alexandrov was one of the most celebrated pianists in the world, a Russian virtuoso who had performed in concert halls across Europe and America. She had listened to recordings of his performances, studied his interpretations, tried to understand what made his playing so extraordinary, and now he was standing in her community center, telling her she would never be good enough. "I have performed in every major concert hall in the world," Viktor continued. "I have studied under the greatest teachers, won the most prestigious competitions. I know talent when I see it, and I know when someone is pursuing a dream that will only lead to disappointment. Take my advice, find something else to do with your life. Music at this level is not meant for people like you. People like you." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Maya wasn't sure if he meant blind people, black people, poor people, or all of the above. It didn't matter. The message was clear. She didn't belong in his world. Victor's footsteps retreated toward the door, and Maya heard it open and close again, leaving her alone with the piano and her shattered confidence. She sat there for a long time, her hands hovering over the keys but unable to press down. For the first time since she was 7 years old, Maya wondered if music was really where she belonged. Maya didn't touch the piano for 3 days after Viktor Alexandrov's visit. She told her mother she wasn't feeling well, which wasn't exactly a lie. The encounter had left her feeling sick to her stomach, questioning everything she thought she knew about her abilities. Patricia noticed the change immediately. Her daughter, who usually woke up humming melodies and spent every free moment at the keyboard, now sat quietly in their small living room, listening to the radio but not really hearing it. On the 4th day, Patricia sat down beside Maya on their worn couch and took her daughter's hand. "Baby, you haven't been yourself lately. Did something happen at the community center?" Maya had been trying to keep the encounter to herself, not wanting to burden her mother with more worries. But the concern in Patricia's voice broke through her defenses. She told her mother everything. About Viktor Alexandrov, about his harsh words, about how he made her feel small and incapable. Patricia was quiet for a moment after Maya finished speaking, and then she said something that would stay with Maya forever. "You know, when you were born and the doctors told me you'd never see, I cried for days. Not because I loved you any less, but because I was scared of what the world would do to you. I knew there would be people who'd try to make you feel less than, who'd try to convince you that your blindness defined your limits. But then you found music, and I watched you create beauty that most people with perfect vision could never imagine. That man, whoever he is, he doesn't get to decide your worth or your future. Only you do." Her mother's words provided some comfort, but the doubt Viktor had planted continued to grow like a weed in Maya's mind. She eventually returned to the piano, but her playing lacked the joy and confidence it once had. She second-guessed every note, every tempo choice, every interpretation. The audition was only 6 weeks away, and instead of improving, she felt like she was getting worse. The community center director, Mr. Williams, noticed the change too. He was a retired music teacher who had always encouraged Maya's dreams. One afternoon he approached her after she finished practicing. "Maya, I've been listening to you play for 5 years now, and I've never heard you sound so uncertain. What's going on?" Maya explained about Viktor Alexandrov, and Mr. Williams let out a long sigh. "I was afraid something like this might happen. Yes, Viktor Alexandrov is in Chicago for a series of concerts at Symphony Center. He's staying at the Grand Plaza Hotel downtown. The man is undeniably talented, but he's also known for being incredibly arrogant and dismissive of anyone he doesn't consider his equal." "He was right about one thing, though," Maya said quietly. "I don't have formal training like other applicants will. I've learned everything from books, recordings, and practice. Maybe I'm wasting my time." Mr. Williams sat down on the bench beside her. "Let me tell you something about formal training. Yes, it's valuable, and yes, it gives you technical knowledge and discipline, but it can also make music mechanical, turn it into a series of rules and expectations rather than an expression of the soul. The most memorable performances I've ever heard weren't the most technically perfect ones. They were the ones where the musician connected with the music on a level that transcended technique. You have that gift, Maya. Don't let one bitter man take it away from you. Despite Mr. Williams's encouragement, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that Victor might be right. She decided to do something bold, perhaps foolish. She would go to Symphony Center and listen to Victor perform. She needed to hear for herself what made him such a celebrated musician, to understand if the gap between them was truly as insurmountable as he suggested. The concert was on a Friday evening, and tickets were expensive, but Patricia insisted on buying 2 seats in the upper balcony. They took the bus downtown, and Maya could feel the grandeur of Symphony Center through the echo of sounds in the vast lobby, the rustle of expensive clothing, the refined conversations happening all around them. This was a different world from the community center with its scuffed floors and temperamental heating system. They found their seats, and Maya listened as the orchestra tuned their instruments. The anticipation in the hall was palpable, everyone waiting to hear the great Victor Alexandrov. When he finally took the stage, the applause was thunderous. Maya heard his footsteps approach the piano, heard the creak of the bench as he sat down, heard the moment of absolute silence before his fingers touched the keys. And then he began to play Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2. And Maya understood immediately why he was famous. His technique was flawless, every note crystal clear, every passage executed with machine-like precision. The orchestra swelled around him, and together they created a sound that was undeniably impressive. The audience was entranced, and when the first movement ended, people burst into applause. But something was missing. Maya couldn't quite put her finger on it at first, but as the performance continued, she began to understand. Victor's playing was perfect, but it was cold. There was no warmth, no vulnerability, no sense that he was sharing something deeply personal with the audience. It was like watching a master craftsman demonstrate his skills rather than witnessing an artist bare his soul. The music was correct in every technical sense, but it didn't move her the way music should. During the intermission, Patricia asked Maya what she thought. "He's incredibly skilled," Maya said honestly, "but his playing feels empty somehow, like he's showing off rather than sharing." Patricia squeezed her daughter's hand. "Maybe that's the difference between playing music and feeling it. You feel it, baby. That's your gift." The second half of the concert featured Chopin pieces, including the same nocturne that Maya had been practicing when Victor walked into the community center. As he played, Maya listened carefully, analyzing his interpretation. Yes, his tempo was more consistent than hers. Yes, his dynamics were precisely controlled. But the emotion that Chopin had poured into that piece, the longing and melancholy and hope, it wasn't there. Victor played the notes, but he didn't play the feeling behind them. After the concert ended and they were riding the bus home, Maya made a decision. She wouldn't let Victor Alexandrov's words define her. She would continue preparing for her audition, but she would do it her way, playing from the heart rather than trying to imitate technical perfection. If the judges at Berkeley didn't appreciate her approach, then perhaps that school wasn't the right place for her anyway. But she owed it to herself, to her mother, and to the gift she had been given to at least try. When they arrived home, Maya went straight to her keyboard and played the Chopin Nocturne from beginning to end. She made mistakes. Her tempo wavered in places, but she played with feeling, with understanding, with love for the music itself rather than concern about how it would be judged. And for the first time since Victor's visit, she felt like herself again. The audition was 5 weeks away, and Maya was determined to be ready, not by meeting someone else's standards, but by being true to her own understanding of what music meant. 3 weeks before the audition, Maya received unexpected news that would change everything. Mr. Williams called her mother early one morning, his voice excited and slightly breathless. Symphony Center was hosting a competition for young pianists, open to anyone under 25 who lived in the Chicago area. The winner would receive a cash prize of $5,000 and the opportunity to perform with the Chicago Symphony Orchestra in their spring season. More importantly, Victor Alexandrov himself would be one of the judges. Patricia was hesitant when she told Maya about the competition. "Baby, you don't have to do this. We're so close to having enough money for the Berkeley audition. You don't need to put yourself in front of that man again." But Maya saw an opportunity that went beyond money or recognition. This was a chance to show Viktor Alexandrov that he had been wrong about her, that his harsh judgment had been premature and unfair. More than that, it was a chance to prove to herself that she belonged in the world of serious music, that her disability and lack of formal training didn't disqualify her from pursuing her dreams. "I want to do it," Maya said firmly. "I need to do it." The competition was in 2 weeks, which gave Maya just enough time to refine her pieces. She worked harder than she ever had before, practicing 8 and sometimes 10 hours a day. Her fingers ached. Her back hurt from sitting so long at the bench, but she pushed through the discomfort. She polished the Chopin Nocturne until every phrase sang with emotion. She worked on her jazz improvisation until it flowed naturally like conversation, and she added a third piece, something unexpected, a spiritual arrangement she had created herself, blending traditional gospel melodies with classical harmonies. Patricia listened to her daughter practice every evening after work, marveling at how Maya could take something that had wounded her so deeply and transform it into motivation. But she also worried. What if Viktor was just as cruel in the competition? What if losing devastated Maya even more than his initial words had? The day of the competition arrived on a cold Saturday in October. 23 young pianists had registered to compete, each one bringing their own dreams and ambitions to the stage. Maya and Patricia arrived at Symphony Center 2 hours early, and Maya used the time to familiarize herself with the backstage area, counting steps, memorizing the path from the green room to the stage entrance. She could hear other competitors warming up in practice rooms, their technical exercises echoing through the hallways. Many of them sounded incredibly skilled, and Maya felt a familiar flutter of doubt in her chest. But then she remembered why she was here. This wasn't about being perfect or impressing judges with technical fireworks. This was about showing that music could transcend limitation, that feeling and authenticity mattered as much as formal training. The competition format was straightforward. Each pianist would perform one piece of their choice, approximately 10 minutes in length. The judges would score based on technical proficiency, interpretation, and stage presence. The top 5 would advance to a second round the following week, where they would perform a concerto movement with the orchestra. Maya drew number 17, which meant she would perform in the late afternoon. She listened from backstage as competitor after competitor took the stage. Some were excellent, playing with confidence and skill. Others were clearly nervous, making mistakes that probably haunted them the moment they left the bench. She heard Liszt, Debussy, Prokofiev, each interpretation showcasing years of expensive lessons and conservatory training. When her name was finally called, Maya took a deep breath and walked onto the stage with as much confidence as she could summon. She heard the murmur of the audience, several hundred people filling the orchestra section. She couldn't see them, but she could feel their attention focused on her as she made her way to the piano bench. One of the judges, a woman with a kind voice, asked what she would be performing. "The Nocturne in E-flat major by Frédéric Chopin, Opus 9, No. 2, Maya answered, her voice clear and steady. She heard papers shuffling at the judges' table, heard the scratch of pens as they prepared to take notes, and then she placed her hands on the keys and began to play. The first notes floated into the hall, gentle and questioning, like a voice calling out in the darkness. Maya let the melody speak, didn't rush it, didn't try to show off with speed or volume. Instead, she focused on the story Chopin was telling, a story of longing and beauty found in the quiet moments of night. Her left hand provided a steady heartbeat, while her right hand sang the melody with all the tenderness she could express. She thought about her mother working 2 jobs so her daughter could chase an impossible dream. She thought about the community center where she had spent countless hours discovering who she was through music. She thought about all the people who had believed in her when it would have been easier to tell her to be realistic, to settle for less, to accept that some doors would always be closed to someone like her. The middle section of the piece grew more passionate, the harmonies more complex, and Maya leaned into the emotion without losing control. This was the section where technique alone wasn't enough, where the pianist had to understand the joy that exists alongside sorrow, the hope that persists despite disappointment. And then the melody returned, softer now, transformed by what had come before, like returning home after a long journey and seeing familiar things with new eyes. As Maya played the final notes, letting them fade into silence, she felt a sense of peace. She had played the piece exactly as she understood it, holding nothing back, and whatever happened next, She could be proud of that. The silence that followed seemed to stretch forever, and then the audience erupted into applause. Not polite applause, but genuine, enthusiastic appreciation. Maya stood, bowed slightly, and made her way off stage, her heart pounding but her spirit soaring. Backstage, Patricia embraced her daughter tightly. "That was beautiful, baby. The most beautiful thing I've ever heard." The remaining competitors performed, and when the last one finished, the judges retired to deliberate. Maya sat in the green room with the other pianists, listening to them discuss their performances, compare conservatories they had attended, debate the merits of different piano instructors. She felt separate from them, not because of her blindness, but because she came from such a different world. Most of these young musicians had been groomed for success since childhood, while she had cobbled together her education from whatever resources she could find. After 45 minutes, the judges returned with their decision. They would announce the top 5 who would advance to the final round. Maya listened as they called the first name, a young man who had played a technically dazzling Prokofiev sonata. Then the second, a woman who had performed Debussy with delicate precision. The third and fourth were equally impressive competitors. And then the head judge, an older gentleman with a deep, resonant voice, paused before announcing the fifth and final name. The judges were unanimous in their decision regarding this next performer. Despite having no formal training, she demonstrated a depth of musical understanding and emotional maturity that was truly exceptional. "Maya Henderson, you have advanced to the finals." Maya felt Patricia's hand squeeze hers tightly, and she realized she was shaking. She had done it. She had proven that she belonged here, competing against pianists with every advantage she lacked. But more importantly, she had proven it to herself. The week between the preliminary round and the finals was a whirlwind of activity and anxiety. Maya had to choose which concerto movement she would perform with the orchestra, rehearse with the conductor, and somehow manage not to let the pressure overwhelm her. She selected the first movement of Mozart's Piano Concerto No. 21, a piece that was both technically challenging and emotionally rich, allowing her to showcase both skill and sensitivity. On the Monday after the preliminary round, Maya received a call that surprised her. It was from Symphony Center, but not about rehearsal scheduling. The woman on the phone explained that Viktor Alexandrov had requested a private meeting with Maya before the final competition. Patricia, listening on speakerphone, immediately objected. "Absolutely not. That man has already hurt my daughter once. I won't let him do it again." But Maya was curious. Why would Viktor want to meet with her? Was he planning to intimidate her before the finals? Or was this something else? Despite her mother's protests, Maya agreed to the meeting, scheduled for Wednesday afternoon at a practice room in Symphony Center. She insisted on going alone, though Patricia waited anxiously in the lobby. When Maya entered the practice room, she immediately sensed Viktor's presence. He was sitting at the piano, and she heard him stand as she came in. There was a long moment of silence, and then he spoke, his voice lacking the arrogance it had carried at the community center. "Miss Henderson, thank you for agreeing to meet with me. Please sit down." Maya found a chair against the wall and sat, her white cane held firmly in her hands, her expression neutral. She waited for him to continue. "I owe you an apology," Viktor said, and the words seemed to come with difficulty. "What I said to you at the community center was cruel, unprofessional, and wrong. I had no right to speak to you that way, and I had no right to make assumptions about your abilities based on your circumstances." Maya was stunned. This was not at all what she had expected. "Why did you say those things?" she asked quietly. "Why were you so harsh?" Viktor was silent for a moment, and when he spoke again, his voice carried a weight of sadness. "Because you reminded me of someone I used to be, and I've spent so long trying to forget that person that I've become someone I don't particularly like." He went on to explain his story. He had grown up in poverty in a small village in Russia, so poor that his family sometimes didn't have enough to eat. But he had found an old piano in the basement of a church, and he taught himself to play by listening to scratchy recordings on a borrowed radio. When he was 12, a visiting music teacher heard him play and recognized his talent. She arranged for him to attend a conservatory in Moscow on a full scholarship. "At the conservatory, I was bullied mercilessly," Viktor said. "The other students came from wealthy families, had private tutors since they were toddlers. They mocked my accent, my clothes, the fact that I had learned to play by ear rather than through proper instruction. I was so desperate to prove I belonged there that I became obsessed with technical perfection. I practiced until my fingers bled, memorized every rule, every expectation. I became the best because I believed that being the best was the only way they would accept me. He paused, and Maya heard him sit down on the piano bench. But in my quest for perfection, I lost something important. I lost the joy that first drew me to music. Playing became about winning, about being recognized, about proving my worth. And somewhere along the way, I became exactly like the people who had made my life miserable. I became the bully. When I heard you playing that day at the community center, Victor continued, I heard something in your performance that I haven't felt in my own playing for years. You were playing with your heart, with pure love for the music itself, and instead of being inspired by that, I felt threatened. I felt like you were showing me everything I had lost. So I tried to tear you down, to convince you that your way of approaching music was wrong when really I was the one who had lost his way. Maya didn't know what to say. She had spent weeks hating this man, using anger at him as fuel to improve her playing, and now he was sitting here revealing his own vulnerabilities, showing her that even the most successful people carried wounds and regrets. Your performance in the preliminary round was extraordinary, Victor said. Not because it was technically perfect, it wasn't. You made several small mistakes that a trained judge would notice. But you made the audience feel something. You made me feel something, and I haven't been moved by music like that in longer than I care to admit. You have a gift, Miss Henderson, but it's not the gift I initially thought you lacked. You have the ability to connect with music on a level that most trained musicians never achieve because we're too focused on technique and perfection. Why are you telling me this now? Maya asked. Is this about the competition? Are you trying to help me or discourage me? I'm telling you this because you deserve to know the truth about why I said what I said, and because I want to help you, if you'll let me. I have no right to ask for your forgiveness or your trust, but I'd like to offer my assistance with preparing for the finals. Not to change how you play, but to help you refine the technical aspects that might be holding back your natural expressiveness. Maya sat with this offer for a long moment. Part of her wanted to refuse out of pride, to prove she could succeed without his help. But another part of her recognized that this was an opportunity she might never have again. To learn from one of the world's great pianists, even for just a few days, could accelerate her development in ways that years of self-study might not achieve. I'll accept your help, Maya said finally, but on one condition. You have to be honest with me, but you also have to be kind. I don't need someone to coddle me or pretend I'm better than I am, but I also don't need cruelty disguised as honesty. That's more than fair, Victor agreed. When would you like to start? They arranged to meet for 2 hours each day until the finals. Maya would continue her regular practice routine, but Victor would help her understand the technical aspects of the Mozart concerto more deeply. He would explain the historical context, the structural elements, the ways that small adjustments in timing or dynamics could enhance the emotional impact without sacrificing the authenticity of her interpretation. When Maya left the practice room and rejoined her mother in the lobby, Patricia immediately asked what had happened. Maya explained everything, and Patricia listened with a mixture of skepticism and cautious hope. Just be careful, baby. People don't always change, and sometimes they say what we want to hear without meaning it. But as the week progressed and Maya worked with Victor each day, she began to see that his apology had been genuine. He was patient, encouraging, and respectful of her unique approach to music. He showed her techniques for managing difficult passages, explained the relationship between the piano and orchestra in the concerto, helped her understand how to project sound in a large hall without sacrificing subtlety. More surprisingly, Victor began to change as well. Working with Maya seemed to remind him of why he had fallen in love with music in the first place. He started playing with more warmth, more vulnerability. One afternoon he played Chopin's Nocturne for Maya, but this time his interpretation was completely different from the one she had heard at his concert. It was softer, more intimate, filled with the longing and tenderness the piece deserved. That was beautiful, Maya said when he finished. Why don't you play like that in your concerts? Because I'm afraid, Victor admitted. Playing with that much emotion means revealing yourself to strangers. And I've spent so long hiding behind technical perfection that I've forgotten how to be vulnerable. But listening to you play has reminded me that vulnerability is not weakness. It's where the real music lives. By the time the finals arrived the following Saturday, Maya felt more prepared than she ever had for any performance. But more importantly, she had gained something unexpected from her time with Victor. Not just technical knowledge, but the understanding that even the most accomplished musicians struggled with doubt and fear, that success didn't erase insecurity, and that sometimes the people who hurt us the most are fighting their own battles we know nothing about. The morning of the finals, Maya woke up before dawn, her mind already racing with the music she would perform later that day. She sat at her small keyboard in the apartment, playing through the Mozart concerto movement in her head without making a sound, her fingers moving silently over the keys. Patricia made her daughter's favorite breakfast, pancakes with blueberries, but Maya could barely eat. It wasn't nervousness exactly, more like an electric anticipation that made sitting still almost impossible. The finals were scheduled for 7 in the evening, prime time for Symphony Center's regular audience. Unlike the preliminary round, which had been attended mostly by family members and music students, tonight's performance would be in front of a sold-out crowd of over 2,000 people. The event had generated significant media attention, partly because of the unusual story of a self-taught blind pianist competing against conservatory-trained musicians, and partly because Victor Alexandrov's presence as a judge added celebrity appeal. Maya arrived at Symphony Center at 3 in the afternoon for rehearsal with the orchestra. This was only her second time playing with a full ensemble, and the experience was overwhelming in the best possible way. The conductor, Maestro Chen, was patient and encouraging, guiding her through the coordination between piano and orchestra, helping her understand when to lead and when to follow. The orchestra musicians, professional players who had performed with countless soloists, treated her with respect and warmth, impressed by how quickly she adapted to their sound. During a break in rehearsal, Maya sat backstage and heard footsteps approaching. She recognized Victor's distinctive walk before he even spoke. "You're doing remarkably well with the orchestra," he said. "How are you feeling about tonight?" "Excited," Maya answered honestly, "and terrified. But mostly excited." Victor sat down beside her. "I want to tell you something before the competition begins. Regardless of what happens tonight, regardless of who wins, you've already accomplished something extraordinary. You've reminded everyone here, including me, that music is not about following rules or meeting expectations. It's about truth and connection and courage. Thank you for that gift." There was something in his voice that made Maya turn her head toward him. "You sound like you're saying goodbye. You're not leaving, are you? You're still judging tonight?" "I am," Victor said. "But I've made a decision about my career that I wanted you to know about. After this competition, I'm taking a year away from performing. I'm going back to Russia to teach at the conservatory where I studied. I want to help young musicians from disadvantaged backgrounds, students like I was, students like you. I want to teach them that technical skill is important, but it's not everything. I want to help them find their voice, not just train them to imitate mine." Maya was moved by this revelation. In the span of 2 weeks, Victor Alexandrov had transformed from her harshest critic to her mentor, and now he was completely changing the direction of his career. "What made you decide this?" she asked. "You did," Victor said simply. "Working with you this week has been more fulfilling than any concert I've performed in years. I realize that I've been chasing applause and recognition when what I really want is to matter, to make a difference in someone's life the way my first teacher made a difference in mine. Playing the same concertos in different cities for audiences who clap politely and then forget you by the next morning, that's not enough anymore. I want to do something that lasts." Before Maya could respond, a stagehand announced that the finalists needed to gather for a pre-competition meeting. Victor squeezed her shoulder gently and left, and Maya made her way to the designated room where the other 4 finalists were waiting. The atmosphere among the competitors was tense. Everyone understood that this was a life-changing opportunity. The winner would receive not just the cash prize and the performance opportunity, but also the recognition and connections that could launch a serious musical career. Maya could hear the nervous energy in the room, competitors pacing, humming their pieces under their breath, engaging in superstitious rituals to calm their nerves. The competition order had been determined by random draw earlier in the week, and Maya would perform 4th out of the 5 finalists. The first 3 competitors were all exceptional. The young man who performed first played Rachmaninoff's second piano concerto with breathtaking technical facility, though Maya thought his interpretation lacked emotional depth. The second performer, a woman about Maya's age, delivered a sensitive and nuanced performance of Grieg's piano concerto. The third played Beethoven's Emperor Concerto with power and confidence that commanded the audience's attention. When Maya's name was called, she walked onto the stage for the second time that day. But now the hall was full. She could feel the weight of all those eyes on her, all those expectations and judgments. She heard whispered conversations stop as she made her way to the piano. Someone in the audience coughed, and the sound echoed in the cavernous space. Maestro Chen announced the piece, Mozart's Piano Concerto No. 21 in C major first movement. The orchestra began with the opening theme, strings and winds creating the elegant, graceful melody that Mozart had composed nearly 2.5 centuries earlier. Maya counted measures in her head, preparing for her entrance, and then it was her turn. Her fingers touched the keys, and she began the piano's first statement of the theme. The sound of the piano blended with the orchestra, and Maya felt herself relax into the music. This was what she had been born to do, what all those hours of practice had prepared her for. She wasn't just playing notes on a page. She was having a conversation with Mozart across time, interpreting his ideas, adding her own understanding to his genius. The first movement of this concerto was unique because Mozart had written it with such optimism and lightness. Unlike his later, more complex works, this piece celebrated joy, simplicity, and beauty. Maya embraced that spirit, letting the music dance and sparkle. She played the rapid passages with clarity but also with playfulness, as if the notes were children running through a sunny meadow. She shaped the lyrical sections with tenderness, bringing out the singing quality of the melody. In the development section, where Mozart explored different keys and variations of his themes, Maya took interpretive risks, emphasizing unexpected harmonies, creating moments of tension that made the resolution back to the main key more satisfying. She was aware of the orchestra around her, listening to the oboes and flutes, matching her phrasing to the strings, creating a unified musical statement rather than competing for attention. The cadenza, where the orchestra stopped and the piano performed an elaborate solo passage, was Maya's moment to show everything she had learned. She executed the technically demanding runs and trills with precision, but she also brought out the structure of the cadenza, showing how Mozart had constructed it as a miniature composition within the larger movement. And then as the cadenza ended and the orchestra rejoined her for the final triumphant conclusion, Maya felt a surge of pure joy. She wasn't thinking about winning or impressing judges. She was simply immersed in the beauty of the music, grateful to be part of something larger than herself. The final chord rang out, and for a moment there was complete silence. Then the audience erupted into applause, louder and longer than they had clapped for any of the previous performers. Maya stood and bowed, overwhelmed by the response. She heard people shouting, "Brava!" and the stamping of feet, signs of genuine enthusiasm rather than polite appreciation. As she walked off stage, Maya could hear the audience still applauding. Patricia met her in the wings and embraced her daughter tightly, tears streaming down her face. "That was incredible, baby. Just incredible." There was one more competitor left to perform, and Maya listened from backstage as the final pianist delivered a solid, technically accomplished performance of Tchaikovsky's first piano concerto. It was impressive, but Maya sensed that the audience was still thinking about what they had just heard, still processing the emotional impact of her performance. After the last competitor finished, the judges retired to deliberate. Maya sat with her mother in the green room, holding Patricia's hand, suddenly exhausted from the adrenaline and emotion of the evening. Other competitors sat around them, some confident, others anxious. Maya tried not to hope too much, tried to be content with what she had already accomplished, but it was impossible not to wonder what decision the judges were making. The judges deliberated for almost an hour, which felt like an eternity to the 5 finalists waiting backstage. Maya could hear muffled conversations, occasional laughter, the sound of papers being shuffled. She tried to calm her racing heart by running through the Mozart in her mind, analyzing what she could have done better, what she thought had gone well, but every few minutes her concentration would break and she'd be back in the green room, acutely aware of the ticking clock and the weight of anticipation. Finally, a stagehand appeared and announced that the judges were ready. The 5 finalists were escorted back on stage, where chairs had been arranged for them to sit while the results were announced. Maya could feel the audience's presence, thousands of people settling into their seats, conversations dying down as everyone prepared to hear the verdict. The head judge, a distinguished professor from the Chicago College of Performing Arts, took the microphone first. He thanked everyone for attending, praised all the competitors for their exceptional performances, and explained that the judge's decision had not been easy. Every finalist had demonstrated remarkable talent and musicianship, but in the end, they had to choose one winner based on a combination of technical proficiency, artistic interpretation, and the intangible quality that separates good musicians from truly memorable ones. "We'll announce the results in reverse order," he said. 5th place, receiving a prize of $500 and a certificate of achievement, is Timothy Chen for his performance of Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2. Timothy stood and accepted his award with grace, though Maya could hear the disappointment in his footsteps as he returned to his seat. The judge continued with 4th place, then 3rd place. Maya's name still hadn't been called, which meant she had placed either 1st or 2nd. Her mouth went dry, and she felt Patricia's hand squeeze hers from somewhere in the audience. 2nd place, the judge announced, receiving a prize of $2,000 and an invitation to perform in Symphony Center's Young Artist Series, goes to Jennifer Martinez for her beautiful interpretation of Grieg's Piano Concerto. Jennifer's gasp was audible, and there was warm applause as she accepted her award. That left 2 finalists, Maya and the young man who had performed the Tchaikovsky Concerto last. Maya's heart was pounding so hard she thought everyone in the hall must be able to hear it. The head judge paused for dramatic effect, and then Victor Alexandrov himself took the microphone. Maya recognized his voice immediately. "The judges were unanimous in our selection of 1st place," he said. "We have witnessed something extraordinary tonight, a performance that reminded all of us why we devoted our lives to music in the first place." The winner demonstrated not only impressive technical ability, but also a depth of musical understanding and emotional authenticity that touched every person in this hall. Ladies and gentlemen, the 1st place winner of this year's Young Pianist competition is Maya Henderson. The audience exploded into applause, and Maya sat frozen in her chair for a moment, unable to process what she had just heard. She had won, against all odds, despite her lack of formal training, despite her blindness, despite Victor Alexandrov's initial assessment that she would never succeed at this level. She had won. Patricia rushed onto the stage, tears streaming down her face, and helped Maya stand. They embraced as the applause continued, and Maya felt her own tears beginning to fall. Victor approached with the trophy, a beautiful crystal piano mounted on a wooden base, and placed it in Maya's hands. But he also did something unexpected. He leaned close and said, "I was wrong about you in every way possible, and I will spend the rest of my career making sure that talented musicians like you are never discouraged the way I tried to discourage you. Thank you for being brave enough to prove me wrong." The ceremony continued with speeches and photographs, but it all passed in a blur for Maya. The reality of what had just happened was too large to fully comprehend. She had won $5,000, enough to cover not just the Berkeley audition, but also several months of expenses. More than that, she had proven to herself and to everyone watching that her approach to music was valid, that her dreams were not foolish or unrealistic. After the official ceremony ended, Maya was surrounded by well-wishers. Orchestra members congratulated her. Audience members asked for autographs. Local music teachers introduced themselves and asked if she would consider giving masterclasses. Mr. Williams from the community center appeared with Mrs. Johnson and Mr. Chen from her neighborhood, all of them beaming with pride. The attention was overwhelming but also deeply moving. These were the people who had supported her journey from the very beginning. A reporter from the Chicago Tribune approached and asked if Maya would be willing to do an interview. She agreed, and the reporter asked about her background, her training, what winning this competition meant to her. Maya answered honestly, talking about her mother's sacrifices, the community center that had given her a place to practice, the challenges she had faced as a blind musician trying to break into a field that often valued sight reading and visual communication with other musicians. What would you say to other young musicians who face similar obstacles? The reporter asked. Maya thought carefully before responding. I would say that your limitations don't define your potential. They might shape how you approach your goals, they might make the journey harder, but they don't determine whether you can succeed. Find people who believe in you, work harder than you think is possible, and most importantly, stay connected to why you love music in the first place. Technique and training are important, but they're tools to express something deeper. Never lose sight of that. As the crowd finally began to thin and the evening wound down, Victor approached Maya one more time. "I have a proposal for you," he said. "I know you're planning to audition for Berklee, and you should absolutely do that. But I'd like to offer you something else as well. When I return to Moscow next month to begin teaching, I'd like you to come with me for the summer session. All expenses paid, full scholarship. I want to introduce you to the conservatory, help you develop your technical skills without losing the authenticity that makes your playing special. And I'd like you to perform a concert there. Show Russian audiences what American music education looks like when it comes from the heart, rather than just from expensive schools." Maya was speechless. A summer in Moscow, studying at one of the world's great conservatories, performing for international audiences. It seemed impossible, a dream too big to be real. "I don't know what to say," she admitted. "Say you'll think about it," Victor suggested. "Talk it over with your mother. You have time to decide. But Maya, I want you to know that I'm not offering this out of guilt or pity. I'm offering it because you're genuinely talented, and because I believe you have the potential to influence the future of music education. The world needs more teachers and performers who understand that music is about communication and emotion, not just technical perfection. You could help create that change." Patricia, who had been listening to this conversation, spoke up. "Mr. Alexandrov, I appreciate everything you've done for my daughter this past week. But I need to know your intentions are genuine. Maya has already been hurt by people who made promises they didn't keep. I won't let that happen again." Victor nodded respectfully. "I understand your concern, Mrs. Henderson, and it's completely justified given how I treated Maya initially. All I can offer is my word that this opportunity is sincere, and my promise that if Maya accepts, I will do everything in my power to help her develop her gifts while respecting her unique approach to music. You're welcome to come to Moscow as well. In fact, I'd prefer it. Maya is still young, and she should have family support while navigating a new culture and educational environment." Maya and Patricia exchanged a long look, a conversation happening between them without words. Finally, Maya spoke. "I'll audition for Berklee as planned. That's been my goal for years, and I need to see it through. But after that, if the Moscow opportunity is still available, I'd like to accept. Mom, what do you think?" Patricia was quiet for a moment, then smiled. "I think my daughter just won one of the most prestigious piano competitions in Chicago. I think she can make her own decisions about her future. And I think maybe it's time for both of us to be brave and take some risks. So yes, if you want to go to Moscow, we'll figure out how to make it work." The three of them stood there in the emptying concert hall, the cleaning crew beginning their work around them, and Maya felt the shape of her life changing. Tomorrow she would wake up as a competition winner, as someone whose name would appear in the newspaper, as a musician who had proven that excellence could come from unexpected places. But tonight she was just grateful to be standing between her mother and her former critic-turned-mentor, feeling the weight of the crystal trophy in her hands and the lightness of possibility in her heart. 6 months after winning the competition, Maya stood backstage at Berklee College of Music in Boston, preparing for what would become one of the most important performances of her emerging career. The audition had gone better than she could have hoped. The panel of judges had been impressed not just by her technical abilities, which had improved significantly during her time working with Victor, but by the emotional depth and maturity of her interpretations. She had been accepted with a full scholarship, and the school had even arranged for specialized resources to accommodate her blindness. But before starting at Berklee in the fall, Maya had decided to accept Victor's invitation to spend the summer in Moscow. Those 3 months had transformed her understanding of music and her place in the world. The Moscow Conservatory was filled with incredibly talented students from across Russia and Eastern Europe, many of them from circumstances as difficult as Victor's had been. Teaching alongside Victor, helping these young musicians find their authentic voices while developing their technical skills, had shown Maya that her future might involve more than just performing. Now she was back in the United States for a special concert that Victor had arranged. Symphony Center in Chicago was hosting an evening titled Music Without Borders, featuring 3 young pianists who represented different approaches to musical education. One was a traditional conservatory student from Juilliard. Another was a child prodigy who had been trained privately by master teachers since age 4, and Maya, representing the power of passion, determination, and unconventional paths to excellence. Patricia sat in the front row, wearing a new dress she had bought specifically for the occasion. Beside her were Mr. Williams, Mrs. Johnson, Mr. Chen, and dozens of other people from the neighborhood who had supported Maya's journey. Victor was in the audience as well, having flown back to Chicago specifically for this performance. The hall was sold out, partly because of the publicity Maya's competition win had generated, partly because people were curious to hear how this blind, self-taught pianist would sound performing alongside musicians with every advantage. But there was another reason for the sold-out crowd. Maya had announced that she would be performing her own composition for the first time in a major concert hall. Over the summer in Moscow, working late at night in one of the conservatory's practice rooms, she had composed a piece that told her story through music. She called it Finding Light, and it wove together elements of gospel spirituals, classical harmonies, and jazz improvisation into something entirely unique. The first two pianists performed brilliantly, each showcasing their impressive training and innate talent. The Juilliard student played Liszt with breathtaking virtuosity. The child prodigy performed Prokofiev with precision that seemed almost superhuman for someone so young. The audience applauded enthusiastically after each performance, recognizing the exceptional skill on display. When it was finally Maya's turn, she walked onto the stage alone. There would be no orchestra for this performance, just her and the piano and 2,000 people waiting to hear what she would do. She sat at the bench, took a deep breath, and began to play. Finding Light opened with a simple melody, reminiscent of the spirituals Maya had grown up hearing in church. The tune was plaintive and searching, asking a question that had no easy answer. Her left hand provided a steady, walking bass line, while her right hand explored variations on the theme, each one revealing a different emotional color. There was sadness in the music, acknowledgement of struggle and pain, but also an undercurrent of hope that refused to be extinguished. The piece moved through several sections, each representing a different chapter in Maya's journey. There was a section of aggressive, dissonant chords that captured the anger and frustration she had felt after Victor's initial cruelty. There was a lyrical passage that represented her mother's unwavering love and support. There was a jazz-influenced section full of unexpected harmonies and syncopated rhythms that celebrated the joy of discovery and growth. And then, about 2/3 of the way through the piece, something extraordinary happened. The music shifted into a conversation between two voices, two melodies intertwining and supporting each other. One voice was Maya's, representing her authentic self and approach to music. The other voice was clearly influenced by classical European traditions, representing what she had learned from Victor and her time in Moscow. The two voices argued at first, clashing in their harmonies, but gradually they learned to complement each other, creating something more beautiful together than either could achieve alone. The final section of Finding Light brought all these elements together into a triumphant statement. The gospel melody returned, but now it was enriched by classical harmonies and jazz rhythms, transformed by the journey but still recognizable as itself. Maya played with complete freedom, not worried about making mistakes or meeting anyone's expectations, simply sharing her truth through music. Her hands moved across the keys with confidence and joy, telling a story about finding your voice, about refusing to let others define your limitations, about the possibility of growth and change, even for those who seem set in their ways. As Maya played the final chord and let it ring out into silence, she realized she was crying, not from sadness but from the overwhelming gratitude she felt for this moment, for everyone who had helped her reach this stage, for the gift of music itself. The audience remained silent for several long seconds, and Maya wondered if perhaps she had misjudged, if her personal story was too specific to resonate with others. Then the applause began, but it was unlike any applause Maya had heard before. People weren't just clapping, they were on their feet, cheering, some of them crying as well. The sound washed over her in waves, and she stood and bowed, overwhelmed by the response. The applause continued for several minutes, and Maya heard voices calling for an encore. She sat back down at the piano and played one more piece, the Chopin nocturne that had started this entire journey. But now, after everything she had learned and experienced, her interpretation had deepened. The notes were the same ones Chopin had written nearly 2 centuries ago, but Maya's understanding of what they meant had been transformed by her own story of struggle, humiliation, growth, and triumph. She played it as a gift to Victor, to her mother, to everyone who had believed in her when it would have been easier to turn away. After the concert, the backstage area was chaos. People wanted to meet Maya, to congratulate her, to tell her how her performance had moved them. Several music journalists asked for interviews. A recording executive expressed interest in producing an album of her compositions. University music departments inquired about her doing lecture demonstrations. It was exhilarating and exhausting all at once. Victor found Maya during a brief quiet moment and pulled her aside. "That composition was remarkable," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You've accomplished something I've spent my entire career trying to do. You found a way to honor tradition while also creating something completely new and authentic. I'm proud to have played a small part in your journey, and I'm grateful. You gave me the chance to become a better person and a better musician." "You played more than a small part," Maya said. "Yes, you hurt me initially, but you also had the courage to admit you were wrong and to change. That takes real strength. And you taught me so much, not just about piano technique, but about the complexity of human nature, about how people can grow and transform if they're willing to face their own flaws." Patricia appeared then, embracing her daughter tightly. "Baby, I am so proud of you I can barely find words. Not just because of how you played tonight, but because of who you've become. You took something painful and turned it into something beautiful. That's real strength." As the evening finally wound down and Maya prepared to leave Symphony Center, she reflected on how much had changed in just 6 months. She had gone from practicing in a community center, uncertain of her future, to winning a major competition, studying in Moscow, and performing her own composition in one of America's great concert halls. She had a scholarship to Berkeley waiting for her in the fall, plans to return to Moscow the following summer to continue teaching, and opportunities emerging that she could never have imagined. But perhaps the most important change wasn't external. Maya had discovered that her worth didn't depend on anyone else's validation. She had learned that obstacles could become opportunities, that critics could become mentors, and that staying true to yourself while remaining open to growth was the real key to success. She understood now that her blindness wasn't something to overcome or ignore, but simply one aspect of who she was, neither limiting her potential nor defining her entirely. As Maya and Patricia walked out of Symphony Center into the cool Chicago night, Maya could hear the sounds of the city around her: traffic, distant music from a bar, people laughing as they left the concert hall. Each sound painted a picture in her mind, creating a world as vivid and real as anything she might have seen with her eyes. "What are you thinking about?" Patricia asked as they waited for their bus. Maya smiled. "I'm thinking about how grateful I am for everyone who believed in me when I didn't fully believe in myself. I'm thinking about how strange and wonderful it is that Victor Alexandrov, the person who almost destroyed my confidence, ended up helping me find my voice. And I'm thinking about all the young musicians out there who are facing their own obstacles, who need to hear that success doesn't look the same for everyone, that there are many paths to excellence." The bus arrived, and they climbed aboard, heading back to their neighborhood on the south side. Tomorrow, Maya would return to teaching piano to children at the community center, sharing what she had learned with the next generation. She would continue composing, exploring the intersection of different musical traditions. She would prepare for her first semester at Berkeley, both excited and slightly nervous about what that next chapter would bring. But tonight, riding the bus home with her mother beside her and the memory of applause still ringing in her ears, Maya felt completely at peace. She had found her light, not by being perfect or by meeting everyone else's expectations, but by having the courage to be authentically herself. And in doing so, she had helped others, including Victor Alexandrov, find their own way back to what really mattered about music: the honest expression of human emotion, the connection between performer and audience, and the transformative power of art to change lives and open hearts. The story of a young, blind black woman who had been humiliated by a famous pianist had become something far more meaningful. It had become a story about redemption, growth, and the possibility of change. It had become a story about how cruelty can transform into compassion, how weakness can become strength, and how the most unlikely connections can lead to the most profound transformations. Most of all, it had become a story about never giving up on your dreams, no matter how many obstacles stand in your way, because sometimes the very thing that seems designed to break you ends up making you stronger than you ever imagined possible.